Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Araf, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Okay, it looks like we're going to Yud. Yeah. So here are the two rights. וצריך לזכות על ידי אחר. Right, so what does that mean? If you're gonna make your eruv for some other people besides yourself, you have to bequeath it to them by way of a third party. You can't do it yourself. So it says here the with Yosef regarding that Pashut beperek chulin, right? Chalon, right? So there's a perek there in Eruvin, P Amud Aleph, and that's what it says there. Interesting. Okay, so it's a Gemara. Okay, and then it goes on. So it says, right, the tour that you can't really do this by way of some children, let's say you have some small children, so use them as your third party. Can't do that. Has to be somebody who's grown up, right? Bar mitzvah, whatever. So, okay. Let's see the tour inside. There's some more stuff there. Also, you can't use slaves. But if you have grown children, you can do it. And also if you have Jewish slaves. Today we don't have this one, we don't have that one. קטן שאינו סמוך על השולחן. So, but if you have a child who's not relying on the parents, he's independent, right? So what does that mean? He has his own budget, he doesn't eat from the father's budget in terms of the food, whatever, right? So that's considered to be like he's already grown up in this particular issue. So he says another thing, which is that if you have a big guy, right, but he's he eats from his father, so it's considered to be like a little guy. Okay, interesting. What about his wife, right? Pasak Rav Alfas. So the Rif says, Veri also, Veri, you can do it with your wife. Okay. So then he brings here the Rosh, right? He says you cannot do it with your wife. Also Balaitu, right? So we have here two rabbis here, two rabbis there, on both sides here. Kitzad hu says, so what do you do? Lokeach ha'eruv. How do you do it? You take the eruv, right? Biado in his hand. ונותנו למי שיש לו זכות בשביל מי שמערב על ידו. So you give it to that third party, right? ואומר, לא, זכה בעירוב זה, you tell him, please, acquire this, with this עירוב, right? בשביל פלוני, for this person. ונותנו, אז זוכה מידו, and the one who acquires it, like, takes it from his hand, וחוזר ונותנו מיד הזוכה. And he takes it back. Then he makes a blessing, right? Al mitzvot eruv. There is a blessing for the eruv. ואומר בדין יהא שרה לן לאפויה ובשולל ובתמונה. So it says, right, this is the language of the eruv, right? That it's going to be allowed for us by way of this eruv to bake and to cook, right, and to do all kinds of things, right? Also installation and to light candles, and to do all kinds of all our needs. Right? Miyom tov l'Shabbat, Miyom tov l'Shabbat. And also all the people in town, or if he wants to specify somebody, even if he put the eruv, כתב אדוני הרב שלא יכול לבשל מיום טוב הראשון לשבת. So it's interesting, right? Okay, that's already probably a different halacha. So let's see first Beit Yosef, we'll come back to that. So as we said, right, that you have to do it by way of somebody else. If you're giving it to some other people. Right, we always mentioned that. And then he says, as we said, that you cannot use your small children. That's what they said, these rabbis. Second Berka Betzah. So they learned it from the Mishnah, which is taught in Perek Chalon. Which is in Eruvin, as we said. Ayin Tet Amud Bet. It said Eruvei Chatzerot, right, regarding Eruvin of the courtyard. Rambam, also Rambam, he says, Katab Perek Vav. He writes in the 5th or 6th Perek, Kol shezache be'eruv Shabbat, zache be'eruv bet Tavshinim. So it says, whoever does the Eruv of Shabbat, he also does the Eruv of the cooked dishes. The whole Sheno zoche be'oto Eruv, whoever cannot do this, eno zoche bezeh. He cannot do that either. So what is he trying to say here? That, we're talking about adults and children, right? If you're an adult, you can do it. In both cases, to acquire the eruv, and also if you're not an adult, if you're a child, so then you cannot do it, right? And there's also other cases, right? Besides the child, that they cannot do it. So it's equated, right, one to the other. So whatever works over here works also over there, right? Pretty much standard. Okay, so then he goes on. As we said, right, the child who has his own the menu, he eats by himself, he doesn't rely on the father, he's considered to be grown up. So this was already explained in chapter 366. The Rosh holds that way. Okay. Right. Okay. But he says there are several rabbis that argue with that, right? I'm sorry, the Rambam, the Rif, and other big rabbis. Okay. So says there the tour so he says, right, good to be stringent by like both sides. I know לכתחילה, זה something לכתחילה, ובדיעבד, but he says, בדיעבד, כל אחד מהם חשוב גדול, but בדיעבד, he says, they're all considered to be already grown up. דכיוון דמידי דרבננו, so he says, since it's a rabbinical, סומכים על דברי המקל. So we rely on the lenient opinion, he says. Okay, good. Well, there you go. כתוב בהגות בסמ"ק, it says in this rabbi, regarding the eruv of the courtyard, So even according to the one who says that if a big guy, right, is eating with his father's table, Kashul Katan is considered to be small. But he says once he gets married, it doesn't work anymore like that. Once he gets married, he's considered to be already independent, no matter what. No matter whose food he eats. Okay. It says in Kolbo B'Shem Rabbeinu Peretz. Okay. All right. So it says in the Rosh, it's second Berk of Petza. Oh, Beperek Chalon, and also this one, which is in Eruvin, as we said. The Avdo B'Shivchato Ivrim. If you have Jewish slaves, even though they rely on your food, lo havi adam ke'ado. So they're not considered to be like the same as you. That means you can use them. So that's only a big son, right? The but we say, right, that he's like his father if he's eating with his father's table, right? לפי שרגיל להיות תמיד סמוך על שולחנו, אבל נוכרי הסמוך על שולחן בעל הבית, but he says when it comes to a goy, right, who's eating on the table there, and מתציאתו לבעל, so he says what his find found object doesn't belong to the master, לבעל הבית, to the homeowner, whatever. אפילו אוכל אצלו בחינם, so even if he eats free by him, all the more so if they're right non-Jewish slaves, that they're eating from their wages. This comes to Tosot from his Perek Gitin. Some of them will Perek come with the Mitzvah. Also, first Perek about Mitzvah. Katav Kobo says the Kobo. So he says you can use, right, as we said, your Jewish slaves, even if they're children. So he says because a child can bequeath to others, right, something which is rabbinical. I says that which we can give the erub by way of a child. That's what Rambam Rambam says there that Perek Aleph, Katav Ramagid, he wrote that also. Katav Ramagid, says Ramagid, Dachita bePerek Kabel. It's also there in this Perek Gitin. Some of them will look at that. Veishto Pasak Harav Fas. Bari. So he says the Rif and the Re Paskind shemezakeh alahem al yada, and he can do it by way of them. Diber Arif Perek Bet Betzia. So the Rif is in first Perek of Betzah, second Perek. The Ken Dat Rambam, also Rambam. The Katav Rosh, the Rosh says Al Diber Arif regarding the words of the Rif. Velini the En mezakeh al yada ishto. So he says, right, that doesn't work with the wife. He doesn't agree with that. Because that which I said, right, regarding erubim of courtyard, that you can do by way of your wife. Mokela b'shilhei nidarim. So it says there in the nidarim, pechat amud bed. B'sheshta bites. It's talking about a case where she has a house, in that courtyard. The migo the zachia the nafsha. Since she acquires for herself, she can also acquire for others. Aval en la bite. But if she doesn't have a house there, in that courtyard, law doesn't work. The yad isha kiyad ba'ala. So because the wife and husband are the same, right? They're like one unit. Okay, good. So he says when it comes to, right, the erub of the cooked dishes, as we're talking about here, a person doesn't have to bequeath it to his wife, or also to the family, right? Once he does it, right, they're all allowed to do it. As we said, right, it goes by the household, So the head of the household does for everybody, right? That's the way it works. So since you don't have to give it to them, they also cannot give it to others as well. So it says resembles like the eruv of the courtyard. She She doesn't have a house in a courtyard. So he says, the Ran says, no, not so. So again, right, we had here, make sure we got everything straight here. So we had here yeah, right, that was the Rosh. So now he brings the Ran, and the Ran doesn't agree. Okay. The Okbinan Hatan Hanen Nami Hachinami Mile Aliba de Rabbi Meir. So that's according to Rabbi Meir. He says that qualification in Talmud. The Amar en kinyan leisha below bala. So he holds that a woman cannot acquire without her husband. Kedita perik kama says in the first parak of Kiddushin. But the rabbis will argue with him. Not so. Right? The Rabbi Meir Atam lo tzrichinan be'eruvin chatzerot. So according to the rabbis there, we don't need for the eruv of the courtyard to build mavoi. They should have a house in that courtyard in the alleyway, whatever. Yilkach matzeh mezakeh al yedei ishto. So therefore, he says you can do it by way of his wife. So the Ran says you can do it, right? Okay. Well, so we have the Rosh on the one side, we have the Ran on the other side. So he says, so he says, right, that halakhically speaking, what do? We go like the majority, right? Which allow this, they're lenient. So what does that mean? They say you can do it by way of your wife. That's halacha. Okay, good. So that's the story there. Good. Okay, so let's see the Shulchan Aruch here. That was Yud, right? Yeah. Okay. So let's see there. Okay, so it says like this, right? Shulchan Aruch, "Ha'me'arev le'acherim," right? If you're doing, as we said, right, you're giving your eruv also to others as well. So as we said, right, you have to do by way of a third party. You can't give it yourself. So it goes on, right? So it says whoever you can use for eruv of Shabbat, right? You can also use for this eruv. So it's the same rule, right? But if you cannot do that eruv, right? Whoever cannot do it, you can't do this one either. So the rules are equal, right? Regarding the various eruvs, right? That we make like that. So as we said, right? You cannot use small children, but you can use your wife. Also, you can use big children, right? Yeah. Okay. So interesting. So he says in parentheses here, look in chapter 366, I guess over there talks about it regarding Shabbat, right? So whatever applies there also applies here, right? That's what he's trying to say. Maybe we should take a look at that quickly. Let's take a quick look over there. 366, Shin Samech Vav. Why not? Okay, so I'm going to bring it up so I can show you. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's take a look at the Shulchan Aruch here. So it says in Shulchan Aruch, כשמזכה להם על ידי אחר, so it says when you're doing it by way of somebody else, לא יזכה על ידי בנו או ביתו קטנים, right? As we said, you cannot use small children. So he says even if they're not, relying on your table, it doesn't matter. So I'll skip all the slaves, right? We don't have slaves today. I'll skip that. And we'll go straight to the other stuff, right? Which is your wife, whatever. Right. So when it comes to the big children, he says you can use them even if they are eating on your table, right? So in other words, basically, it's like all or nothing, right? So the small children you cannot use, the big children you can use, no matter what. That's one thing. Then yeah, so it says okay, also you can use your wife, as we said, right? So yeah, that's pretty much a story. So the Ramah says also, right, good point over here, which is like a general rule. He says when it comes to Eruv, we always go like, we always rely on the lenient opinion. And so that helps us. By the way, the same thing also applies to Avelut, mourning. We always go like the lenient opinion. So, okay, so that's pretty much the story. I guess we'll go back to our screen over here. But there's a fundamental question here, right? Really, really, like, why does it have to be done by way of somebody else? What's the reason for that? So let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Maybe explains that. He doesn't really give the reason. Let's see. There's one more here. Not really. Okay, so I guess we'll go on, but I'm gonna check this and get back to you on that one. Just curious, why that is. I think one time I learned why that is, but I don't recall right now. I do remember one thing though, this that there is a machloket also regarding, what about bediavad? Let's say you didn't do it by way of somebody else, right? Does it work for the other people or doesn't work, right? So he paskins in the Chazon Ovadia that it does work bediavad. Lechatchila you can't do it that way, but bediavad does. It's interesting. So okay, go to the Aleph. We just did Yud. So let's see if we can find Yud Aleph. Here it is. Okay, so he brings here in the Bet Yosef, Katav around the Pek Bet Betzah, it says the Ran, Tzarich HaZocher Le'Agbiya Min HaKarka Tefach. So whoever, right, acquires whatever, has to lift up the Eruv, one tefrach, right, which is like, 8 centimeters. So he says, since he is, he's giving, right, in his own domain, lo matzezache, belo agba, right, so you cannot do it without lifting it up. Oh, okay, that's a big hint, by the way. My question, I think that we're already getting to the answer over here, but let me just read through it 1 second. Right, and צריך לזוכר, וכיוון דברשותו מזכהו, לא מצא אזרח בית. זה הכי תנא לה בתוספתא, that's what's in תוספתא, עירובין, גבי עירוב החצרות, right, regarding עירוב of the courtyard, רבנו לא הזכירו כאן, this is the Torah didn't mention it here, לפי שסמך על מה שכתב בסימן ש"ס"ו, he relied on what he wrote over there right in the laws of Shabbat. לגבי עירוב חצרות, עירובי חצרות, ומשם ללמוד עירובין תבשילין, right, so we learn from there to here, so this way. Okay, so that's good. Okay, so let's go to Shulchan Aruch and we'll see what we can glean out over here from this whole discussion here. Right, so it says Shulchan Aruch, צריך הזוכה להגביה עירוב מן הקרקע טפח, right? So as we said, right, the person who acquires the eruv has to lift it up, right, one tefach from the ground, right, or whatever, or from the table, whatever it is, right, wherever the eruv is. So here we do have here Mishnah Berurah also. So let's see what he says. All right, so he refers you back to the laws of Shabbat regarding something here. But anyway, there's also Magen Avraham here. Let me just see what he says. Magen Avraham. Yeah, okay, that's same thing. Not really anything here. But I think here, right, the major revelation here is what we read in the Bet Yosef in the name of the Ran. Because just to backtrack there and see this again. Um, right. So in other words, just to recap, right, this whole thing, this whole idea. What are we saying over here? What we're saying is that again, this person is making an error, but he also wants to, include other people as well, whether it's his friend, right, or it's the whole town, whatever it may be. Okay. So in order to effectuate that third party that we spoke about, right, who's acquiring it for the rest of the people, whatever, he has to lift it up. So the Ran gives you a reason for that, right? Because since we are now standing in the domain of that, right, that homeowner or whatever, right, this person, right, the head of the household there. So there's no way to acquire it without lifting it up because you're in his house. So to make an actual acquisition, you have to lift it up um, because you're in his domain. So that may help us a little bit, right, to understand why he needs a third party to acquire the eruv, for the rest of the people. Because perhaps, right, the reason is since he's standing in his own domain, right, he can't really acquire it for others. It's something like that. I have to look at it a little bit more deeply, this whole thing. But that seems to be like the direction. It still needs a little bit more thought to get it straight. Okay, anyway, we'll come back to that. Bezat Hashem. So we'll go to Yudbet. So we'll go back to the tour, right, and read on the side there. Right. So in other words, according to this language that I see here in the Torah, it seems to me that this is the main thing over here. The reason why he needs a third party is because he's trying to acquire it for somebody else. And that person cannot be his child, right? Small child. Why? Because he's not an independent entity. So it's just like an extension of him, you know? So that's why he needs somebody who's independent, not really extension of him, a grown-up child, right, or whatever. So that person can do the job. Okay, so let's go on a little bit. It still needs a little bit more clarification. So it says the tour like this. Right, so even though he put the eruv, כתב אדוני אבי ז"ל, so the says the Rosh, שאינו יכול לבשל מיום טוב הראשון לשבת. Right, so this is an important thing here, which is that the eruv allows you to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbat, but that's the second day of Yom Tov, but not from the first day, because it's like 2 days away, you know. So that the rabbis did not permit. You can only cook for Shabbat the day before Shabbat and not 2 days before. That's what he's saying. כך כתב בלאי טור, that's what it says in טור also, ויכול להניח העירוב על דת להיות סומך עליו כל זמן שהוא קיים, אפילו להיות יום טוב אחר, נאכל או נאבד קודם שבישל, okay. So let me just see where we are here in the Bet Yosef. So it says Bet Yosef here regarding this tour that we read. The Pashut, so it says it's simple, right? It's obvious. The berotze la'erev al achirim, right? It's talking here about he wants to do for others, you know, the eruv, as we said, right? ומפני כך צריך לזכות דאילו ואינו רוצה לערב על אחרים. But if he doesn't want to do for others, אינו צריך לזכות כלל. He doesn't have to acquire it at all. אלא לוקח העירוב בידו, מברך. He just takes it in his hand and he blesses on it. ואומר בדין עירוב יהיה ישרה לנה דפויה. And it says, right, the declaration that we mentioned, right, it's going to be allowed for us to cook and to bake and all that stuff. Okay, that's the first part of Yud Bet. Then Yud Bet, the second part here. Let's see what he says here. So he's here. It says, he brings a source for this, right? This declaration. Harif ve'Rambam, right? It's the Rif and the Rambam said this. Lo katvu ela le'afuya bashura, right? So this is an important point over here, you know, which is that the Rif and the Rambam only wrote to cook and to bake, right? And not the other stuff that we saw, which is, you know, to light candles. וכתב רב מגיד, says רב מגיד, יש מי שמוסיף מנוסח המילה להדלקה נר. Some say, as we said, right, it says רב מגיד, that they want to add also the language of lighting candles as well. כן כתב בעל ההלכות, says in ההלכות, למיפה ולבשולה מיעבד כל צורכן, right, to רדוק אל שרגא, he says, right, we light the candles also. כתב רשב"א, says רשב"א, שכן ראוי לומר, so he said that's the proper thing to do, like that. כך כתב הראש, it's Rosh Hashanah also says like that, Rosh Hashanah, פרק ב' בצד, גבי מתניתין, also regarding, they say that, לשלושה דברים רבן גמליאל מחמיר כדברי בית שמאי. So there was three things that Rabban Gamliel was stringent like בית שמאי, ויכתוב דבריהם לכמן בסייעתא דשמיא. Says, I'm going to write this later on, he says. Okay, fine, so let's see Shulchan Aruch, right, and get the bottom line here. Let's see what it says here. So in Yud Aleph, right? Yeah, I think we did this one already. So let's go to the next one. Okay. It says in Yudbet, חוזר ונוטל מיד הזוכה ומברך על מצוות עירוב. Right, so he takes it from the person who acquired it for the other people, and then he blesses, right? What's the blessing? Al mitzvat eruv. That's how you bless, right? The whole thing, right? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al mitzvot eruv. Yomer b'din, and then he makes the declaration, right? יש הרי לנו להפריע ובשול אלו התמונה ולקוד שרגע ומעבד כל צרכנה, right? מיום טוב בשבת. לנו ופלוני או לכל בני העיר הזאת. So he brings, right, the text which includes the candle as well, right? When you make this declaration, so you're going to say also it's going to be allowed for us to light the candle as well. But the interesting thing is, that I'm not really sure why he says this here, because you don't really need to make an eruv to light the candles. You only really need it to cook and bake, stuff like that. So, okay, we have to figure that out, the answer to that. So, says the Rama here, so the Rama says something important, right? If you don't know, right, the Hebrew, so then what do? So say it in language you understand, right? Because the whole point is to understand what you're saying. So, say it in English, right? Whatever, right? Whatever you know. After all, you have to know what you're declaring. That's the whole point. It's not just some kind of a ceremony, or some kind of a prayer, right? This is not a prayer; it's a declaration. So you have to know what you're declaring. When it comes to the blessing, you should say it in Hebrew, unless you don't know how to say it in Hebrew, right? Whatever, But if you know, you should say it in Hebrew. Because blessings, in general, right? We say if you know how to say it in Hebrew, you should say it in Hebrew. That's the way we say usually. Okay, very good. So, very nice. So I guess we'll stop there. Let's see. Yeah, I guess let's see what else we got here. There's a couple of questions that I need to answer over here. Next time I'll get back to you on those. Right, so yeah, let's do this one also because we already covered it. So let's just do Yud Gimel, if you don't mind. I'll just hold you for 2 more minutes. Okay, so it's like connected to it, whatever. So right, so the Bet Yosef says regarding what we said, right, the name of the Rosh, that you're not allowed to cook 2 days before Shabbat, only 1 day, right? So if you have 2 days of Yom Tov, you can only cook the day before Shabbat and not 2 days before. Important to know that. So Bet Yosef brings a source for this, right? Kakata b'Teshuvah, it says in Teshuvah, right, of the Rosh, right? V'natan tam mishum debadai yom rishon ikar. So he says, what's the reason for that? Because the first day of Yom Tov is the main day, right? Yom Tov sheni eno ela mishum gezerat, and the second day is just the decree of the rabbis. Shematzah, right? V'chevan she'efshar lo lishchot b'sheni, and since it's possible for him to slaughter on the second day, she'u kechol, it's like a weekday. Lama yishchot b'rishon? Then why should he do on the first day? She'u badai kodesh, which is for sure a holy day. Right. So his reasoning is that since the second day is like lighter, in terms of the holiness, right? So then why do it on the first day? There's no purpose, right? So you shouldn't do it. Better to reduce the prohibition, as much as possible by doing it on the second day, which is like close to being, just a regular day. Yeah. Okay, so yeah. So then he goes on. In Katav Rabbeinu Rucham, also this rabbi says as well. B'Shem Parshim, the name of the commentaries. V'chen Katav Ran, also the Ran says this. Perek Bet B'Shem Rabbeinu Ephraim, name of this rabbi. Yeno mevashel miyom tov rishon l'Shabbat. He also says, right, don't do it 2 days before. נתן תם משום דשבת קרובה להתירו על ידי ערוב בשבת. רחוקה לא התירו. So it says, the reason is because they only allow the day before. Makes sense. כך כתב רמגיד, right? Also רמגיד says this בשם לטור, namely, this rabbi. וגם הרשב"א כתב בתשובה. So all these rabbis wrote the same thing pretty much, right? The רשב"א, תשובה. דהיינו מבשל ביום טוב ראשון לשבת על ידי עירוב מהטעם שכתב ירושלמי. So it says it brings the reason of the Yerushalmi for this. What's the reason? ואף על פי שכתב שמתוך גרסת ירושלמי הוא מסופק מדבר נקטינן ככל אנך רבתה דפשיטא להו דאסור. Right? So he says, but the Yerushalmi says it's somewhat doubtful, but he says all the other rabbis that mentioned it, we should go like them. So therefore, right, we're stringent about it. Okay, very good. So we got the idea. Okay. Yeah. So let's do a Shulchan Aruch and we'll finish it up here. Right, so as we said, so he says, even though he put an eruv, he's not able to cook from the first day of Yom Tov to Shabbat, right? In other words, 2 days away. That's not possible to do, right? So therefore, what you should do is, right, if you want to cook for Shabbat, wait till the second day of Yom Tov, which is the next day, the day right before Shabbat, and do it there, right, next to Shabbat. Obviously, if the second day of Yom Tov falls on Shabbat, then you don't have this issue, right? You have to do it the first day. Obviously. Okay, very good. So if you have any questions, let me know. B'ezras Hashem, well, I guess we'll stop here. So I have a couple of questions here, that I need to look into a little bit. So next time I'll try to fill you in, right, on what I found. I'll give you the news. B'ezras Hashem. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. B'ezras Hashem. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch. We'll see you on Sunday, right? B'ezras Hashem. And then we'll talk about Monday night, because I was reminded that last year we actually had a class on Tisha B'Av, and we learned the laws of Avelut, of mourning, So I guess we must have started like a little bit late, about 9ish, whatever. So if you guys want to do that this year also, we could do it, as long as you guys want. I have no problem with that. We can learn the laws of mourning. Okay. So think about it and let me know, right? Well, we still have some time to think about it. You can let me know on Sunday if you're interested in doing that. Otherwise, well, whatever. What's up to you? I can probably pull it off. Okay, very good. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch.
Thank you so much.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless.